In my first year of university, I asked myself, how do I study for my classes at McGill? I asked this question a lot because I was putting in countless hours to prepare and study for exams without any improvements in my results. So I went online and searched for sources on how to study. I ended up integrating tips from YouTuber Ali Abdal, strategies from my friends, and my own workflow to come up with my study method. I use this method to study for more theoretical classes like biology, psychology, and neuroscience at McGill University. My strategy has 4 parts. Number 1, scoping the subject. Number 2, understanding the content. Number 3, remembering the content. And number 4, applying the content. Before the first day of class, I read all the syllabi just to get a general idea of what the subject is about. This is really important because it gives me a general idea about how to prepare for the exams. I look for important things like what the testable content is. For example, can I be tested on lecture and textbook content even if those don't overlap? I'll also highlight important information like the meeting times, office hours, and exam dates. With this information, I'm able to formulate a general schedule and see if the class combination I'm doing is feasible. Once class has actually started, I only spend like 10 to 15 minutes before each lecture to get a bird's eye view of the topics covered. If there's a summary slide, I just read that quickly and that's it. The most important thing was to figure out how I learn best. I learned that I'm an auditory learner, so I don't really retain a lot of information by just reading the textbook or the slides. So I make sure to attend every class in person to hear what the prof has to say. In lecture, I download a PDF of the slides and I take detailed notes on the side. I don't really see the point of having a blank page for notes because I end up just rewriting the stuff already on the PowerPoint and I could use that time to process information instead. During the class period, the goal for me is number 1, to make sure I understand everything that was said. If I don't, I highlight that page or sentence in pink and I ask the prof right after class. Number 2, make sure that I have all the testable content in one document, especially if what the prof says is also fair game, even if it's not on a slide. When I get home, I make flashcards with an application called Anki. I would have my notes on one side and then I make cards out of my notes. The goal here is number 1, to make the resource of what I ultimately study off from, and number 2, make sure I have no gaps in knowledge. Anki is what I primarily use to remember things because it's based on active recall, quizzing myself out loud, again taking advantage of the fact that I'm an auditory learner, and spaced repetition. I learned this now, but do not make cards for things you already know. The goal here is just to remember the content. It's the second most important after understanding the content because if you can't remember it, then it's kind of pointless for exam purposes. Anyway, like I alluded to earlier, I just use Anki for remembering the content. I have a schedule of when I do this. So I do the first round of Anki as close as possible to when I first learned the content. Then I try my best to do it every single day, especially when it comes 2 weeks before the exam. A week to a few days before the exam, I also have a study session with a group of friends where we just quiz each other. The last step is, roughly 5 to 7 days before the exam, I do a whole lot of practice questions, depending on whether I have them or not. I save these until I think I'm ready, and then I do them in mock exam conditions. In psych courses, I tend to not get practice questions, so what I do is just predict them. For example, in my hormones and behavior class, the prof said we'd have to label 2 diagrams in the midterm. So I went through every lecture slide, assessed whether the diagram would show up on the exam or not, and if I thought it did, I whited the diagrams out, printed them out, and labeled them over and over until I got them right. In sum, I use these 4 parts to prepare for midterms and final exams in every single class that I have that's more content-based rather than application-based, like math or physics. I hope this helped, and let me know if you'd like me to make another video on anything else that I wish I knew.